Kia ora talofa namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cache. We are here to discuss Aotearoa sporting matters. I'm sure there's a greatest rivalry somewhere in our coverage. Maybe Miramar versus Napier City is the greatest rivalry of them all. Warriors, Rabbitohs, not even... Well, it can't be the greatest rivalry if it's not like the Rabbitohs' biggest rivalry, so that's not going to work. I don't know, maybe we got New Zealand A versus Adelaide and ACT, the greatest rivalry. Any other greatest rivalries on our beat today?
Over the weekend, Tim Payne played a game for Olympia in Paraguay where they played against their local rivals, which was a team I'd never heard of, but I don't want to hold that against them because I'd never heard of Olympia before Tim Payne signed with them. I'm just not clued up on Paraguayan football very well. I doubt he was either. But he played against they were calling it the Super Classico, and they won because Tim Payne played, and they win every time Tim Payne plays, and they don't win every time he doesn't play, which is a trend that at first I was dismissive of because I'm like, yeah, well, they subbed him on 3-0 up in his debut, so that hardly counts as a game that he like contributed towards the win, even though he did score a great goal. But the two games he's played since, they've won both of them, and he's played 90 minutes, and they've not won any of the games he hasn't played in. So that's a trend. But afterwards, because that was a Super Classico, I guess that's a Paraguayan greatest rivalry. And afterwards, one of the guys who, I don't know, someone on the broadcast team who could speak English, did a post-game interview with Tim Payne, and he asked him if this counts as the greatest moment of his career. Well, this guy played at a World Cup like 1 month ago. That's why you signed him, is because he was a cult hero at the World Cup, and you're asking if this game is the best moment of his career. Very good diplomatic answer from Tim Payne as well, sort of talking about like, well, it's too early to say. I'm in the moment. I just want to enjoy this experience and the wonderful atmosphere and the support from the fans and everything. Like, good answer. He's been working very hard on how to be a polished, presented media presence, and he's doing a very good job of it. And he's also playing some very good football. But yeah, apparently that was a Super Classico that outranks playing at a World Cup, so that must have been a pretty big rivalry.
I'm going to throw this hot take out there. I think that the greatest rivalry is the lamest sporting event name currently in existence. Like
there's some competition for that. I'd have to think about it. There's definitely some lame cliches out there, but yeah, that one's probably up there.
But like the Ashes isn't known as the greatest rivalry in cricket. It's known as the Ashes. Right? State of origin, the name is state of origin. It's not like the greatest rivalry in rugby league. The name isn't. I'm an academic and an English scholar, but I get my nouns and verbs and adjectives all mixed up. But I just find it pretty lame if your description is the name. I think that's the best way I can sum it up. Like, yes, you can describe something as the greatest rivalry, but surely you can do better than naming your thing. It's almost, I think the cricket stuff is getting in this territory where any cricket nation that plays another cricket nation, you take two once we're famous cricketers from those nations and you're playing for a trophy, as if we always need to play for a trophy. And I've kind of come full circle on the cricket context stuff. I don't think every game of cricket needs some mystical context around it. Like, we can just play a one-day international and have a bit of fun. That's all good. The crowd shows up, the fans at home are watching, they're having a good time, the players are having a good time. We love cricket, we love watching cricket. Here's an entertaining game of cricket. Not every single game of cricket has to fit into some wider context, and not every, now we can't say the B word, but not every cricket series, just a common series between two nations, not the B word. For those who don't know at home, it's bilateral, which everyone says to make themselves seem a little bit smarter than they are. It's just a cricket series between two nations.
I reckon that bilateral word also fits into what you're saying about trying to add extra context to every series, because it sounds fancier. If you just say New Zealand's playing India, you say New Zealand's playing India in a bilateral series. but they're playing each other. It's games between the two teams, but that sounds fancier, which is the same thing as being like New Zealand's playing England, so Martin Crowe, Graham Thorpe, here's a trophy, forge it out of your old bats, and the extra context. I think that's the. I reckon that part of the same trend.
Yeah, so in the India example will be this bilateral series competing for the Javagal Srinath Roger Twos trophy between India and New Zealand. Like, how many different names do we need for the series? How many different descriptors do we need for a cricket series between two nations? All of which is pretty lame. None of it is as lame as the greatest rivalry. For a, like, I don't know, there's so many other options they could come up with, but your greatest rivalry, thanks to Tim Payne, who did not just have his greatest moment in football, that opens us up to some quick football takes, because we do have Chris Wood. Like, do any of these Premier League teams, obviously we've got local derbies, we've even got a derby in Aotearoa, and hopefully in a couple of years we might have a NRL derby in Aotearoa. None of which will be called the greatest rivalry, none of which will be called the rivalry, none of which will be called the goodest rivalry. Right? Like, that's not coming into any naming categories for football derbies. But like, are there any other football examples? I think football does it better. Like, the North London derby is an easy one. I don't even know what the Aotearoa derby. Like, now we're just repeating derby, so that is kind of lame as well. Not quite as lame.
If you're speaking in English, you call it the derbies of whatever. Maybe it's geographical. Maybe it's just like the Kiwi derby. Like, they tried to come up with a name for the Auckland versus Wellington one, and the whole time I'm thinking, like, you don't need to do that. It'll happen. If it needs a name, it'll get one organically. If it doesn't need a name, we don't need to name it. It can still it's still going to be what it is. Because when you said that, I'm thinking, like, what's the biggest rivalry I can think of in English football? And it might be a little biased in saying this, but maybe like Manchester United versus Liverpool, built upon like the two previous dynasties of past eras, one leading into the other, and challenging for trophies and stuff. But there's no name to that. You do get them with, like, North London derby, because it's geographical, because it's Spurs versus Arsenal. They're right next to each other. Like
Manchester
the Scouser
derby.
Darcies or whatever, Everton versus Liverpool, like, they're literally, their stadiums were, I assume they still are, like, right across a park from each other. You walk from one to the other. Manchester derby, like, those, if it's geographical, it's easy to name because it's just part of the city. And some people would argue that if it's not geographical, it's not actually a derby at all. It's just a rivalry. It's something else. It's that kind of thing is supposed to be for teams like whose fans, like, work together, go to school together, see each other every day, like fans from different fan bases within the same family, because they overlap, because they're right next to each other, and that's where the rivalry stems from. So they do it well there, but they do it well because it's like, either it's something obvious like that, or it's something that's grown out of competition over the years. It's not something you need to force. Though, I mean, I guess the so-called greatest rivalry, I'm assuming the greatest rivalry is the All Blacks South Africa thing, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I just need to be checked, because I didn't watch the All Blacks game over the weekend, and I haven't been very clued in about how that's gone. So I just had to. There was a little 5% doubt in my head to just make sure I'm not talking about the wrong thing. That is grown over. Like, there's no. Those countries aren't right next to each other. It's actually quite a big trip to get from one to the other. That's grown up over just competition and being the two best nations through the history of the sport internationally. Like, anything else is forcing it, though. But it's the organic part is fine. That's what it is. It's just the All Blacks versus Springboks. You say that gets me more fizz than trying to put a label on anything,
It is the greatest rivalry in international rugby. Like, it is
Yeah.
that. But in terms, like, suddenly now it's called the greatest rivalry as like as a title, and that's just pretty strange. We do love a battle in Aotearoa.
Sure.
Battle of the Bridge, obviously Auckland centric. Battle of the Bridge, Auckland versus North Harbour, Battle of the Bombays, getting down to the Waikato, Battle of wherever else. All of which leads me to the actual introduction in our podcast today, and that is congratulations to Northland, the Tunnies, winners of the Ranfurly Shield. Congratulations to Northland Rugby Union. We are big fans of the Ranfurly Shield and NPC Rugby. Do you have any thoughts about Northland, current holders of the Ranfurly Shield, and in true Ranfurly Shield styles, they might hold it for a couple of weeks? No disrespect to Northern Rugby Union.
A couple of days.
Yeah, but
Tasman on Sunday,
It is kind of weird how that trophy can, like, it can either stay in one place for a couple of years, or there's just this mad turnover depending on how, like, the schedule irons out. If you win it, you got a home game next week, you might lose it straight away.
Yeah, I hope they get at least one good defense in there. I'll try turn up on Sunday because that'll be quite a fun game, I think. Of course, it will be a great atmosphere. It was they got a really good team too, and they played fantastically against Canterbury to win it. Just like smoked them overall on the scoreboard. But there was this period where Canterbury were really pushing, like last 5 minutes of the first half, and they just held on, defended in their 22 consistently throughout that. Canterbury turned down a couple penalty goals, and then that's a turning point in the game there where they don't get anything out of that. Yeah, brilliant stuff. They're touring it around the region now. Apparently, the Shield's like up in Kaitaia tomorrow and out somewhere else the next day, Kerikeri the next day or something like that. I don't know.
Hopefully, they're doing a bit of training.
Well, I don't know if you saw like some of the news coverage and stuff when they came back, and they pretty obviously had a night of celebration after the win, which you deserve to. Like, I think the Rush brothers were interviewed on the telly and were definitely worse for wear. Happy to admit worse for wear. And then the next day, because that was a Thursday, I think on Friday night they took it to one of the to a local pub, which is a sponsor of the team, and apparently had like players there and whatever. And I know one of my mates who I saw at football the next day had been there, wasn't playing the next day. That's why he was at the pub the night before. He was saying like the Shield had gone by the time he got there, but a few of the guys were still hanging in. They've got a week to recover. There was a Thursday to Sunday turnaround, and not a Thursday to the next Sunday, but Thursday to the Sunday after. So like 10 days or whatever. So yeah, I'm guessing they'll be getting back into training now. Maybe it's like the you send the injured players with the Shield, one or two of them to tour it around or something like that, and everyone else has to knuckle down again because it's the thing about winning a trophy, right? Especially this one where you have to compete for it. It's not the end of the season. You didn't win a grand final. You got the off season to celebrate. You win a Shield and you got to defend it the next round. So yeah, I'm guessing the training gets back into it now. But nice one. That the first time for 47 years that Northland have held their own Ranfurly Shield.
And it was a very hearty Northland team. Like, you got some Rush brothers, Sam Knock, Revez Rehana are from up north. Like, it seems like a lot of those players are actually Northland players. And, NPC, you get Super Rugby players from different regions who are just linked up to a random province. But a lot of these provincial rugby teams in the NPC do a great job of selecting their players from club rugby to then represent the region. And Northland seem like they're doing a great job just in terms of building out, because Northland's been pretty decent for a couple of years as well, which is good to see. I am curious about Chris Wood at Nottingham Forest. And this was going to be the first topic until I got sidetracked, so we'll swing back around. Not sure who Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest, their greatest rivalry is, but Chris Wood wasn't starting in Nottingham Forest's first game of the season. I think they lost against who?
Leeds,
yes.
lost to Leeds United, conceded a very silly free kick, which beat the keeper at the near post right near the end.
And so Chris Wood wasn't starting, and Nottingham Forest have a new coach, former Crystal Palace coach. Um, is this like, what do you make of Chris Wood's current situation with Nottingham Forest? Was that just like, oh, you're coming back from a World Cup, we'll ease you back in for the first game? Does Mr. Glasner dislike Chris Wood? Is Chris Wood like, he'll slot back into a starting striker position? How are you assessing Chris Wood's status at Nottingham Forest right now?
Yeah, a lot of TBD about that, I think, because on the one hand, it made sense to not play him too much in the first game because he didn't actually play very much in preseason. He was late back after the World Cup because he had his full rest and he joined up with the team. Like midway through their preseason tour where they were in camp in I think it was Portugal. So, because their previous coach was Portuguese and organized this whole Portuguese tour of preseason games and everything, and then got sacked. And then the Austrian coach comes in, but carries on with the prearranged schedule. So Tyler Bindon came back straight away. He cut his holidays short. He took less than what he's entitled to in order to be there for day one of preseason to put himself in the best category to impress the new coach and have some kind of opportunity to maybe stick around the team, but more likely just to like put himself in the frame for the future and set himself up for a good loan move, which it sounds like will happen. There's been a few rumors about that because he is an established championship player now. It's not an unknown thing. He had a season with Sheffield United last year and did really well. So there's been a few, not just like the odd rumor here or there, but also I've noticed a lot of fan bases being like, oh, well, we need a centre back and that Bindon fella's probably available for loan. Did well for Sheffield United last year. It'd be worth a look. There was a line this morning, though, saying that maybe Watford are working very hard to sign not just him, but also Zach Abbott, who's another young Nottingham Forest defender, someone who Bindon was competing for minutes during preseason and probably came out behind in that sense. Abbott's about the same age, but a little more experienced because he's been at Forest as an academy player. But Watford would be a pretty good spot because that is a team that's been in the Premier League fairly recently. So a team that's, those are the types of teams that tend to bounce up and drop down and bounce up and drop down. So there's Premier League type potential there. He wouldn't be going to a relegation battler, but also he'd be going to the team that Darren Baisley spent the first 10 years of his professional playing career with, which probably helped. Well, I mean, it shouldn't help him in terms of getting into All White starting 11s after he was playing off the bench in games to start the World Cup. And I don't think it will because he should be a first 11 player from this point onwards anyway. Like you're working into a new World Cup cycle, that's probably not going to be Michael Boxall in 4 years. So you start with that Bindon-Sermon partnership and you work from there. But it probably does, at the very least, it's a nice little bit of alignment for Darren Baisley to see one of the clubs that he was most aligned with himself, signing a New Zealander who is likely to be a very big part of his plans moving forward for the All Whites, assuming Darren Baisley still has the All Whites job from then, because they will do the usual New Zealand football post-tournament review, and Baisley's contract comes up, not quite end of the year, but in a couple of months or something, and I expect he'll probably be renewed. I don't see any reason to go shaking things up. I think they're moving in a steady direction, maybe not as fast as people would like, but that's football, that's natural stuff. So that's where Tyler Bindon's leaning. As to Chris Wood, well, he is entering the last year of his contract. Remember, he did negotiate very hard to get a 2-year contract when they only wanted to give him a 1-year contract. That was during the best season of his career, basically. He scored 20 Premier League goals that year. So it got to where it was undeniable. Just give the man what he wants. You gotta keep him around. But then the next year he was injury plagued, and now this year we're coming into the last year of that contract, the first year of a new manager. So there is a lot going on, and he wasn't very involved in preseason, which meant that I wasn't surprised at all that he didn't start. I was fairly happy to see him get a decent chunk off the bench. Like it wasn't 5 minutes at the end. They gave him a run, and he did have one big chance to give them it was at 0-0 at that point, so he would have been putting them ahead if he'd been able to finish it. Maybe rushed his chance running through. Good awareness to get onto to call for a through ball and a little bit of broken play, but then rushed his shot and dragged it. A little bit rusty, perhaps. You'd say that is a natural thing as well from not having played much during preseason. I think if they stick the status quo, he will end up being a starter for them through this season. Whether he sticks around next year, that might be a way on a free transfer and replace him by that point. Because I do think they work best when Igor Jesus, who started as the striker in this game, I think they do work best when he's playing a bit deeper and Chris Wood is up top. That's how they finish, with Morgan Gibbs-White also as also playing off of Wood. Those guys as the front three. That's how they finished last season and were playing very well. The trick is that there's a week to go in the transfer window and they might just sign someone else, and they seem to want to sign someone else. That seems potentially a likely thing to happen. So that becomes a case of, well, are you signing someone to replace Chris Wood now, or are you signing someone to work with Chris Wood and then next year take over, maybe, that kind of thing. But ultimately, there's a lot of moving parts here, and that makes it very hard to predict. And we don't, because of the new manager, we don't really know whether he sees Chris Wood as a first 11 guy moving forward once he's got his fitness up. What we do know is they have a League Cup game midweek though, and that should be his opportunity to start there, and he will want to score a goal or two in that one just to reinforce his situation. But one way or another, he's sticking around the Premier League this year. He's not going anywhere. It's just whether he can do enough to work another 1-year contract, whether the next year is to go somewhere else or whatever. Don't know. Like, that stuff is all very, very murky at this point. But for now, I think his job is just to try to find a way back into that starting 11, and the way to do that is to do the thing that, perform the currency that has carried him throughout his career, which is score some goals.
Yeah, you went a bit of mindfulness. You went big picture there. I just want to see him start games. I just want to see him start. I
tried to give a bit of both, but yeah, for now, it is very much about can you get into that Premier League team next week, the week after? Like, how quickly can you build up that fitness? How quickly can you win over the manager? That kind of stuff. Because he did have a truncated preseason, and that's given him it's given others a head start in those positions ahead of him.
Callum McCowatt also scored a banger. We'll get in some deep cut footballers and some local football later on, but this was just popped up on the radar. Callum McCowatt just banged one in for Silkeborg, still playing for Silkeborg. There's been no news of him departing Silkeborg, even though that was all a buzz in recent weeks, and he seems to be, like, his response to possibly departing Silkeborg has been scoring goals and setting up goals for Silkeborg, which is great to see.
Yeah, 5 games into the season, he has 2 goals and 2 assists, and Silkeborg have scored 4 goals in 5 games. So 2 plus 2 is 4, and that means Callum McCowatt has been involved in every single goal that club has scored through their first 5 games of the season, which isn't a lot of goals. It would be nice if they could add a few more, but it shows how absolutely essential he's been. He actually played a little bit deeper in midfield in this game. He often plays an attacking midfielder, but here it seemed like a bit even further back than that. And he still scored an absolutely outrageous, like, thumping left-footed volley, which was, not quite like perfect top corner, which is going to get you like goal of the season stuff, but the technique on that was unbelievable. He hits it so hard that the keeper can't even move to stop it within arm's range of. He didn't have to move, like, he didn't have to dive or anything like that, but he still couldn't get there from the shot on the edge of the box. It was just a rocket.
It's like he's basically standing there and the ball's gone past him, and then he dives.
Yeah, like he hits it so hard the keeper's working in rewind mode, and Callum McCowatt's already fast forwarding towards his celebration. Brilliant goal. They ended up losing. That was to put them 1-0 up against Bromby, but they ended up losing 3-1 because Bromby are now top of the table and undefeated so far, won 4 of their 5 games, and are a much better team than Silkeborg. There was a development the other day, though, with the Minnesota stuff. 2 developments, actually. The first development is that Minnesota United, they have a different name for it. It's like Chief Soccer Officer or something pretty silly, but effectively the technical director, very American, right? The CSO, the Minnesota United CSO, he got poached by Austin FC. So a rival MLS club have signed the guy in charge of, like, signing footballers, And all the Minnesota fans seem to be like, yes, sweet, good riddance. He's not like the amount of players he signed that haven't done very well is a long list, and the amount that have been successful is a fairly short list. So they seem to be fairly happy to see that dude go. Crazy stuff for that role to be changing 1 week towards the end of the European window when they're very actively trying to sign players. But I guess the second in charge just steps up in an interim role, and maybe he'll be better, and maybe he'll actually put in a reasonable bid for Callum McCowatt, because they very much lowballed the first offer. It has come back. The second development is that they have said they have put in a second offer, also rejected, raised the bid. I think including add-ons, it would have been about double what they first paid, but the add-ons were about a quarter of the thing, so maybe only increased it by 50% in terms of what's the upfront cash. Not enough. Like, I don't think that obviously it's not enough because Silkborg didn't accept the bid, but it's like quite clearly he's worth more, and he continues to score goals and be such an important player to them that they, for a guy who's under contract, they really kind of can't afford him to leave, especially this late where they can't sign anyone else, unless you're going to give them a very an offer they can't refuse type deal. And that's not happening. So maybe the new interim GM will slash CSO will slash football director will up the money and raise the stakes and coax Callum McCowatt across. I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been stuff from anywhere else, because he's in such good form, and it's not like it's an out of the blue thing. He's just carrying on what he was already doing. In fact, he's probably sped it up, but he's still on the same trajectory as he was for last season and probably the end of the season before that. Like he's had a good year and a half of playing like this, and has been to a World Cup in between. Like, I'm a little bit surprised that Minnesota United seem to be the only team that's getting talked about in the Callum McCowatt sweepstakes. But then perhaps that's because they're Americans and they're loud and they want everyone to know that they're trying to sign a player, and maybe other clubs are working more quietly behind the scenes and not making such a big deal about it and getting embarrassed in the media for putting in bids that are nowhere near the valuation of the dudes. So who knows? This is the last week. Like, the transfer window closes at the start of September, might overlap by a day or two, but effectively, I think like next Monday or Tuesday in New Zealand time, it'll be done. And McCowatt is one to keep an eye on. The other big one to keep an eye on, along with a Tyler Bindon loan, maybe the other major move for like a World Cup player from that all-white squad, is the possibility of Finn Sermon leaving MLS, because he is there was a rumor from Derby County being interested, and there's now a rumor saying that Burnley have had not one but two bids rejected for Finn Sermon. That's a team that was in the Premier League last year, so that would be a pretty handy spot for him to land at if that were to happen. If not, I mean, he's in a pretty good spot where he is as the vice captain for Portland Timbers and one of the very best players, a fan favorite, despite only being there 2 years. In excellent form and working his career in the right direction very well where he is already. It would definitely be a boost to get him into a higher level, like the English Championship, like so many of these other New Zealand fellas seem to be doing at the moment. But there's not as much like jeopardy to that move. That's one of those ones where, like, if they put up a very big bid, he'll go. If they don't, he's happy where he is. Whereas McCowatt is clearly like quite ready to move to a different challenge and to a club that's not going to be losing most weeks, where he has to carry so much of the load for them at the moment because all their other good players left, and he's the one who's stuck behind from the guys who kept them from relegation last year. So he did kick up a fuss a few weeks ago about that, and that was a big talking point at the time. That has been dealt with very comfortably. No one held any grudges about that, and he's continued to be their best player ever since. But he's not saying no to a move, and it was just a matter of whether something comes through that the club is happy with between now and the next week.
I do like to see my Kiwi footballers playing leading roles, though.
Yeah.
Like, even if your team sucks and you're the big dog, given the situation of Kiwi footballers around the world, there aren't many big donnies for their teams. Usually they fit into a role. They're good players just playing a basic role for a good team, or they're out on loan somewhere. You've talked about some of the football Ferns, or You've talked about the lack of football ferns playing in the highest leagues and the highest competitions. Right now, I just want to see some Kiwi footballers be the man, be the woman, be the number one, be the big man. Again, I'm just repeating everything. Be the best player for their team, regardless of like what their team is up to. So I don't know. It seems like Callum McCowatt is not long for Silkeborg, but if he keeps scoring bangers, if he keeps like being their main dude, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, we do need that, because that translates directly into always football firm stuff, right? Because the players who can lead the way for their clubs are the players who come in and lead the way, set the tone for the national teams, and help everyone else do that. So you need a few of those. We do have a couple. Joe Bell would count at Viking. I've got high hopes for Elijah Just and Marko Stamanic this year at Swansea. That's just off the well. I won't run through a whole list of these, but there's a couple good ones. Hopefully, Kate Taylor playing in Spain this year can have something like that kind of impact.
Righto, let's get a bit of mindfulness before we carry on.
Right. And where did I write this down? It is in this bit. Mindfulness goes from Shinru Suzuki. Leave your front door and your back door open. Allow your thoughts to come and go. Just don't serve them tea.
That's interesting. That is interesting, because the serving tea thing was a nice little addition at the end there.
Yeah.
Because when meditating, you do realize, like, I'm serving tea to all these thoughts that pop in. But when you're serving tea to them, you're not releasing them. And the point of meditation, the point of mindfulness, is to see your thought, recognize the thought, and then let it go, so you're actually in peace. Because when your thoughts are going crazy, that's not very peaceful. That is not the quiet thing you're looking for with mindfulness and meditation. But it's almost like irresistible. Because you'll be chilling, quiet, sitting down preferably, but also you can lay down, or you're just doing something where you're doing a task that brings you into the present moment, and then suddenly you got a thought, and it's a good thought. And then you think, whoa, what about this? What about that? All of that takes you away from the peace, from the mindfulness. And it's the most powerful thing you can do is recognize the thought, then let it go. But it's very hard to do because, I mean, sometimes your thoughts are pretty shitty, right? Sometimes your thoughts are demonic. And the beautiful thing is we don't have to act on those demonic thoughts. They're just thoughts. Sometimes your thoughts are excellent. Great idea. And then you try and expand on it. But the task of releasing the thought is the mindfulness. And it's like, regardless of how, because you get some good people coming in your front door, you get some shit people coming in your front door, you get some generous people coming through your front door, you get some people who are taken from you coming through your front door. You don't serve them a cup of tea, though. And this is one of the, this is, it's not a good reflection of hospitality, right? Guest rights, you want to serve them a cup of tea. Like in a real life situation,
law.
In a real life situation, you do want to serve a cuppa, right? It's hospitality. It's the right thing to do. Someone comes to your house, hey mate, you want a drink? You want to sit down? You want to stand up? You want some food? You want some vitamins? Whatever you want, we got it for you. You're here, hospitality, guest rights. Then we can do the red wedding to you. But in terms of mindfulness and meditation, you don't want to be serving that cup of tea. You just let it go and stay in the peaceful zone.
Yeah, I think that's one that I've struggled with in the past, is like the getting to the point, particularly in like a meditative state, whether that's in actual meditation or just, what, like you said, you can just be doing menial tasks that put you in a similar zone, where like I'm at the stage where I can recognize this is an unwanted thought, but I still have that tendency to want to resolve it somehow or explain it away and tell myself why it's this is an unwanted thought because I can this. I don't have to worry about it because of this. And yeah, like resolve the situation in my head to allow it to go, which is not leaving the front door and the back door open. It's leaving the front door open and explaining to the thought why they have to go back out the front door. It's not letting them just pass through. So you actually don't need to do that. You can just like step aside, let them carry on through on the journey. And like I don't have to resolve it. It's done if I just ignore it. That's the resolution. Let it go because these things pop up constantly and you can't just forever be in your own head trying to figure out things like that. Yeah, just it's not even not serving them tea at that point. You've decided I'm not going to serve them tea, but I still have to tell them why they have to leave. So you don't have to do that. You just let them go.
You mentioned Tim Payne, and has he lost a game for whoever?
For Olympia, he has lost plenty while sitting on the bench. He has lost none while actually getting on the field. And I did break this down. Here's a stat for you. 201 minutes in which he's played. During the 201 minutes that he's been on the field, they are conceding an average of 0.9 goals against per 90, scoring 2.7 goals per 90. When he has been on the bench for 519 minutes across all of their games as competition, conceding 1.4 goals against per 90, so that's half a goal worse, and scoring 0.7 goals per 90 compared to the 2.7 goals per 90 while he's on the field. So he might be their best player based on that evidence, early days, but still.
Right, great detail. I was just setting up Riley Price and Luke Laulii for the Warriors, because the Warriors New South Wales Cup team have won 6 games in a row. And that coincides beautifully with Riley Price coming to the Warriors. So he's won 6 games in a row. He's won all 6 of his games for the Warriors in reserve grade. Riley Price. And he's playing 80 minutes in 4 of the last 6 games, in 4 of his 6 games, as a starting prop. So I think that is quite informative when we're thinking about Warriors' depth in their forward pack, right? They signed Riley Price, who was a winning player for Redcliffe in Queensland Cup, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, tackle breaks, offloads, all the stuff, and a little bit extra, a little bit of pizzazz, a little bit of flair, razzle-dazzle that you would expect of a starting prop. But he didn't play 80 minutes very often for the Redcliffe team in Queensland Cup. Then he comes to the Warriors, 6 wins in a row, 80 minutes, tackle breaks, offloads, line breaks, try assists. Riley Price is doing some great stuff in New South Wales Cup. And of course, I've said this a few times, but the winning streak for the Warriors in New South Wales Cup has featured very little of some of the best Warriors juniors. Local juniors specifically. So this would be like if the Wellington Phoenix reserves team won 6 games in a row without their academy,
none of the scholarship players being involved or anything. None of the A-League experience guys there.
Exactly. But Luke Laulii has also won all 6 of his games in New South Wales Cup, and I've overlooked this in recent weeks because I've been focusing on Riley Price coming to the Warriors. But now Luke Laulii comes into the spotlight a wee bit because he seems like a decent option to play on the wing for the Warriors moving forward without Dylan Waitane-Zelezniak. So I do want to shout out Luke Laulii. 6 wins in a row for the Warriors in New South Wales Cup. And he also won 2 of his 3 games for the Magpies in New South Wales Cup before moving to the Warriors. Luke Laulii was actually better in ways for the Magpies in New South Wales Cup while he was still under the Tigers umbrella. More tries, more line breaks, more tackle breaks, more run meters, which I think generally comes from more touches of the footy and maybe a more willy-nilly Tigers style of footy, but he's been very consistent, very solid for the Warriors in New South Wales Cup, and as I said, he's won all 6 of his games that he has played. So he is 8-1 this season for in New South Wales Cup, and I like Riley Price is a equally fantastic winning record in Queensland Cup and New South Wales Cup. There's a few options for the Warriors to fill that winger spot, and the Warriors have plenty of depth in every single position, so it's not really a stressful thing. It's just more of a curiosity to see which way Andrew Webster does go in terms of his selection on the wing. And while I think Luke Lauliti is the best candidate to play wing in the NRL this weekend, mainly based on his work rate, and I think that is something that the Warriors want from their wingers, is lots of runs, lots of run meters, and then finishing in the corner. And we've seen with Dylan Watene-Zelezniak, and then even with Alofiana Khan-Pereira, those runs aren't easy to do. Like, you're a winger running into 3 defenders on the first, second, third tackle of a set. Usually you're going to get monstered. Usually you're going to get smashed. We've talked about how Watene-Zelezniak can do that for 80 minutes, and that's where you reap the rewards. Khan-Pereira is not a massive body. He doesn't seem very physically imposing. He doesn't even run the same as Watene-Zelezniak in terms of running it straight like a psycho. But you do see Alofiana Khan-Pereira, his speed translates to power, so he does burst into the defensive line. And Luke Lauliti, he's got very quick feet, he's powerful, and he seems to embrace the work required of an NRL winger, specifically a Warriors winger. So I think he's the best option, but there are other options. So we do have to be open to whatever Andrew Webster wants to do in that position, all of which will be sussed out tonight, Tuesday night, for Teamless Tuesday. But there's this other dude that I think Warriors folks need to learn about, especially casual folks who aren't necessarily tapped into the Warriors YouTube videos that are recorded every weekend and midweek as well. Have you heard about this dude, Jai Linane?
Yes, from this podcast. He, correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I got the little 5% bell buzzing in my ear just telling me that I might be wrong and I need to not serve tea to that. He's the dude who was signed as halves cover, right? But has come in and been an incredible player playing in the centres.
Yes, he came from the Newcastle Knights. So the Warriors, they're losing Jet Cleary, they're losing Luke Hanson, the 2 Penrith halves, but they have Jack Thompson, who played in the halves for the New South Wales Cup team this week. And this is actually another little nugget that Warriors fans need to know about. This week, there was no Luke Metcalf, Jet Cleary didn't play. And obviously, Tana Boyd didn't play, and Tamaiti Martin didn't play. So some would say those are your 4 best halves. 4 of your 5 best halves, because Chanel Harris-Tavita is obviously one of the best halves as well. And some people, rightly or wrongly, would say Jet Cleary's better than Luke Hanson. Either way, those halves weren't playing. Luke Hanson was playing in the NRL. And the 2 halves who played New South Wales Cup, both under 21s. Jack Thompson from the Newcastle region, and Maui Winitana Patalaseo from Wellington, who had been playing. They had both played under 21s this season, obviously. And then the 2 players in the halves for the under 21s team are obviously under 21s. One of them is Noah Jensen, who is a little bit older. He's had a crazy recovery from a illness to return to football and work back into the Warriors system. And then there's this other dude who played his first game, seems like for over a year, Ashton Ula Iramia, who is probably 18 years old. So the Warriors won in the NRL with the halves combination of Chanel Harris-Tavita and Luke Hanson. And then the 4 halves below that, all under 21s, which seems pretty good. Jai Linane, recruited as a half from Newcastle, so they've had 2 excellent bits of recruitment from Newcastle. Meanwhile, Newcastle Knights are doing excellent recruitment from Aotearoa as well. Jai Linane, recruited as a half, played all his games at centre. in terms of starting position. He has scored 14 tries in 12 games. And he has scored 2 tries in each of his last 3 games. In these 3 games, he's got 6 tries and 7 line breaks. And I'm doing this math on the fly, so it might be a bit tricky. I think he's got 29 tackle breaks in 3 games. He had 8 tackle breaks, 11 tackle breaks, 10 tackle breaks, which are, each of those is in the top 3 for his most tackle breaks in a game this season. This dude's awesome. But the weird thing is, not only does he resemble the 2 Fletchers from Newcastle Knights, Fletcher Hunt and Fletcher Sharp, the guys with the mullets, the 2 Fletchers. We got the Lukes at the Warriors, they got the Fletchers. But it's kind of crazy how Jai Linane, who is from, like, if his first name was Fletcher, there'd be like a crazy big deal about these 3 Fletchers from the Newcastle region, because Jai Linane has the exact same style of running as the 2 Fletchers. In terms of, he gets the ball, you expect him to bust the tackle. But Jai Linane's only doing this at the New South Wales Cup level. But these guys like Fletcher Hunt, Fletcher Sharp, they're all in their early 20s or younger. Jai Linane, I think, is 20 years old, 21. He just turned 21, so he's still eligible for Jersey Flag, but hasn't played any Jersey Flag. I've been thinking that Jai Linane is very, very similar to the 2 Fletchers at Newcastle. So if you are watching Fletcher Hunt, Fletcher Sharp for the Newcastle Knights, who will be actually probably be playing against the Warriors this weekend, the Warriors have their own version of the Fletchers. Because Jai Linane is just as excellent running the footy, and he's just as versatile as the Fletchers. The Fletchers are playing in the halves, they're playing centre, they're playing fullback. Jai Linane has started all 12 games of New South Wales Cup at centre, but he was signed as a half. He could probably do a job at fullback. So I do find the similarities between those players to be rather strange. But the Warriors have their own Fletcher. But he's not a Fletcher, he's a Jai. Of course, the Warriors did defeat the Rabbitohs. How do you feel about the Rabbitohs? They do have a bit of crossover with the Dragons. Obviously, Coach has a bit of history with the Dragons. Ewan Aitken did his role in the famous left edge for the Rabbitohs. Keon Koloamatangi's going to the Dragons.
Next year,
Jaden Sullivan, one of the 3
former Dragon,
one of the 3 excellent juniors from the Dragons, who will soon be leaving the Dragons because Amoni's already gone. Sullivan left, and Sloane's going to be departing soon apparently as well. So that's the good Dragons development system working well there. And shout out to Sullivan, because I think he was the dude that was sat down by Dimitri Vaimunga's pass to Eddie Toiava. If you want to see just like the situation you don't want to be in as a rugby league defender, basically any defense, any sport, go watch that clip of Vaimunga passing to Eddie Toiava, and you will see, I think it's Sullivan, both feet planted, on his heels, he's not going anywhere, and Eddie Toiava is running straight past him. And Dufty was lively at fullback for the Rabbitohs, and he's not good enough for the Dragons.
Well, he wasn't good enough for anyone, to be fair, for a while there, because he left the Dragons to go to the Bulldogs, and he left the Bulldogs to go to, or was it the other way around? Did he go Super League and then back to the Bulldogs? I can't remember. But he was a Super League player for a while there. No one wanted him. Same with Tyrell Sloan. He signed with Super League because no one wanted him. And then since that's happened, he's had a couple of all right games. And now NRL teams want to apparently see if they can get him to back out of that and
Well, I
stick
think
around. I think that's
the
risky,
team
but
he was
never
going
mind.
to in the Super League fired their coach, who was a former
Yeah, who was a
Dragons.
had a
Yeah,
Dragons assistant, and then dramas ensue as they do. Sloane's got a lot in common with Dufty, though. There's a similar players because they're lightning fast, really good creative options. Dufty's emerged. He already had a bit of this at the Dragons, but he's gotten better as a passer as well. But both horrendous defenders, and you sign them because you get excited about the possibilities there, and then the mistakes that continually happen the other direction eventually sort of snap you out of that illusion. But Dufty's improved. He's having a good year. He's revived his NRL career, so fair enough. But he was on the wrong side of a thrashing on the weekend. You know, he didn't lead them to victory against the Warriors. Who it's I know we expect this because we expect it because we see it every time. Um, but it continues to be crazy how the Warriors just have like home crowds at away games. Like they drown whether they're there in bigger numbers. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But even when that's the case, they still drown out the noise of the actual home fans at these stadiums. It's crazy stuff, and it's really like it's probably not underrated for Warriors fans. I think everyone understands this, but it's definitely underrated on the other side of the Tasman, not realizing that it's like they don't really have away games because they have the best traveling support, and it's often not traveling support. It's just people who live in Australia but support the Warriors, New Zealanders who have moved over, or people who've grown up there and just have a soft spot for the team or whatever. Like wherever they go, people turn up, and I don't know if that's recognized as much, especially at this point in the season where people are talking about like finals contention stuff and who's going to get home finals and whatever. It kind of almost doesn't matter for the Warriors because they just keep winning away games with huge crowds that are as good as what they get at Mount Smart. It's crazy stuff.
yeah, that's why I haven't. Well, that and the fact that we've seen many teams come to Mount Smart and win is why I'm not too. I don't really care about the placing on the ladder. Like, it's obviously nice to finish first, but it doesn't mean anything. It's like if the Warriors finish first on the ladder and don't make it to the grand final and don't win the grand final, it's going to be disappointing. So, like, and like the ladder stuff, all the Aussies assume that the Warriors at Mount Smart is the best case scenario. Whereas I kind of like the Warriors in Australia, kind of because I like the Aussie fans. I think they just got a different style. Like, they just have a few different chants. They're active, they're vibrant. Like, the amount of times the Aussie commentators, they must hear it, but they never say anything. Like, you're in a game in Australia, and all you hear is, ooh, up the wires. And then 10 minutes later, all you're hearing is Warriors. It's like, that's coming from maybe a fifth of the stadium, and it's all you can hear in the broadcast. Imagine being a Warriors player. Imagine being a Warriors fan, and you're at the stadium, and you're hearing actual chants that they don't do at Mount Smart, because there aren't really many chants at Mount Smart from the folks who go to the Temple of Mount Smart Stadium. Like, Mount Smart is a completely different vibe. It's its own thing. It's not. I'm not like poo-pooing it, but the Warriors fan base in Australia does their fandom their own way, and it's same. Like, we've seen it on the Gold Coast, we've seen it at Suncorp Stadium, we've seen it in Sydney in recent weeks. And if you're assuming the Warriors need to play finals game at Mount Smart, like, you haven't been watching them play at Australia, because they are. I don't think it even matters. And this is an absolute luxury for the Warriors, because if any Aussie team comes to Auckland, and the beautiful, I have to always highlight this idea because it does get a bit Warriors centric. Like, yes, the Warriors have had a massive impact on rugby league in Aotearoa, but Aotearoa Rugby League is not the Warriors. Because there's a lot of rugby league fans in Aotearoa who don't support the Warriors. There's a lot of players from Aotearoa who are not playing for the Warriors. They're in Australia playing for Aussie teams. Every Aussie team is recruiting from New Zealand. And the status of rugby league is related to the success of the Warriors. It's not because of the success of the Warriors. But that needs to be said, and that is evident in how many, like the Raiders play at Mount Smart Stadium, there's going to be some Kiwi Raiders fans. The Panthers play at Mount Smart Stadium, there's some Kiwi Panthers fans. The Dragons play, there's some Kiwi Dragons fans. But they're not singing, right? There's like a couple scattered around. There's not 10,000. So the Warriors have, it's always a home game, as you said, which is a very unique position for the Warriors to be in. And that's why I'm not too fussed where they play finals games. Even the thirst for money from the NRL to play at Eden Park is a bit weird, but you try to be mindfulness about it and move on. There's another thing that was like similar to your observation, but it's a little bit more nitty-gritty rugby league. Like, and we know the Warriors are a good defensive team. And this is all, like, the way the Warriors are playing, I keep saying, is everything Warriors fans have ever wanted. Even while when they were successful, they were making grand finals, Warriors fans would have wanted like a 80-minute performance, a bit of defense, a bit of grit and grind, rugby league. Now we're seeing the modern version of that, where the Warriors are just straight up one of the best wrestling teams in the NRL. They'll fold you up, and then you have the ruck defense. And that's been one of my favorite things to watch the Warriors do. But I haven't really talked about it much. But now's the best time to talk about it, because the Warriors women have woeful ruck defense. And obviously they got smoked by the Roosters. And I think the Warriors women are in a pretty interesting spot. They do have easier games coming up against the Sharks and Dragons, I believe. And then they play the Broncos, who were one of the best teams, but they have lost a couple of games recently. They've lost to the Titans. Titans have Georgia Hale and Whenua Ramoni playing very well. The Warriors have bad ruck defense. They've had bad ruck defense all season, and then you're coming up against the Roosters, who are the best team, which is a very bad recipe. But like, the Warriors were probably always going to lose that game against the Roosters, but it was embarrassing to have that many points scored on them, and a very bad sign, and quite worrying, and quite sad. And I was quite wrong in thinking that the Warriors women could take over the women's sporting landscape, because they can't do the fundamentals. They can't do the basics. They can't do the things that the Warriors men do at the highest level in the NRL. And that includes ruck defense. And when you're watching the Warriors around the ruck, like, first, you fold them up. You have to fold them up. That is the wrestling. So when you tackle them, you don't make the tackle and fall off. You make the tackle and you're still touching them. You got a body on top of them. Ideally, you turn the body sideways. Ideally, actually, you put them on their back. And if you can't put them on their back, if they're on their front, you turn them towards the sideline. But then, if you got three dudes in the tackle, there is a window where you need to communicate who's going to be the two markers. And an easy way of laying this out is, if Tane Tuapiki's just made a tackle, you don't want him at marker. So that if he's in a tackle with two other players, those three players need to communicate, Tane Tuapiki, get out of here, mate. We're going to be the markers. And then you have to one person gets off, then the other person gets off in layers. If you get off at the same time, the player just stands up, plays the ball, and you haven't got your markers set. But if one player gets off, he gets to marker, the other player gets off, he gets to marker, and then the guy who's just been smashed and folded up, he gets up slowly, he plays the ball, and so on. But you can watch the Warriors communicating to each other in the tackle about who's going to go back to the defensive line and who's going to be at marker. And then you see, I saw it, I mentioned it last week in the YouTube video, but you watch someone like Eddie Aramia Toiava, he's a bit more prominent now because he's showing out in the NRL, but he's one of the least known Warriors players. I've seen him sprint back to the defensive line. Because that's the other thing, right? If you've got three dudes in the tackle, the guy who's not defending at marker, they can either sprint back to the defensive line to be in the defensive line, or they'll jog back to the defensive line and they'll reach the defensive line by the time the ball has been passed from the dummy half. So then they have to try and catch up to the defensive line. But if you sprint back to the defensive line, then you're in the defensive line and you're moving forward with the defensive line. And you've got your two markers set. These are things I've never seen the Warriors do before. Like, the Warriors have never been one of the best defensive teams in the NRL. And being one of the best defensive teams in the NRL means you're controlling the ruck. So you got the wrestle, but then the thing I've been noticing closely is the communication and understanding of these players need to be at marker. These players need to get back to the defensive line. You need to be fit enough to make 3 tackles in a row and then sprint back to the defensive line and get your line speed in order. Again, none of this is evident for the Warriors woman. To the point, the first thing is I've seen some of the worst marker defense I've ever seen from the Warriors woman this season. And that comes in a variety of different ways. Whether they're standing side by side, whether they're standing too close together, whether there's just no effort to get at marker, players walking back to the defensive line, none of it is evident there for the Warriors woman. But then against the Roosters, I thought they were implementing some tactic. The anti-line speed tactic. Where their line speed was like negative. There was no line speed. And I was like, ooh, it's not a good sign because it was early in the game. But maybe this is their way of like absorbing the Roosters' power, just hold back, get sorted, we can catch them and fold them up and all this stuff. Obviously, I was wrong because no line speed, no movement in your defensive line is terrible. And especially when you don't have good markers. So they have no marker defense and the defensive line quite often was moving backwards. Right? That is very, very bad. But then you watch the Warriors men do these things and it is elite. Like this isn't just like regular rugby league. Regular rugby league in terms of, yeah, okay, we got 2 markers here. Yeah, this guy's slow back to the defensive line. Like, just stuff we've all become accustomed to. What the Warriors are doing in this area of rugby league is the best in the NRL. And I don't think it's any surprises that Fisher Harris is involved because the team that was doing it the best, and probably is one of the best at it right now because of their standards, is the Penrith Panthers. These are things the Panthers were doing the best in the NRL during their dynasty. And now we're seeing the Warriors do it at such a high level that I am amazed, because I've never seen a Warriors team do this. And I was thinking about like some things that I like, these are things where you watch it and you're like, this team is good. Because you can watch the Rabbitohs shift the ball to their left edge, right? And you'll be like, oh, Rabbitohs, they're on. But that's the Rabbitohs left edge. The Rabbitohs left edge is always good. The Rabbitohs, I don't know, like I think they scored like 1 try on their right edge against the Warriors. They scored their tries on the left edge against the Warriors, against the makeshift right edge defense. They had some good line speed, but in no way did the Rabbitohs control the game against the Warriors. But don't even think that's related to my point. But my point is, you can watch a rugby league game, any level, and you can sort out which team is well coached, well drilled. They're a winning team. They're all on board. They're all connected. They work hard by their ruck defense. Do you have 2 markers at every play the ball? Is your third guy sprinting back to the defensive line? Because that's the first area you're going to attack, right? Like, that's Wade Egan. And it's every dummy half. That's why the dummy half's so important. That's why a running dummy half and a playmaking dummy half is so important, because the first space you're going to attack is the ruck, behind the ruck. So if you've got bad ruck defense, you're failing the first defensive step. To me, the cricket version of that is everything that happens like from a fielder fielding the ball. First and foremost, when I'm watching a game of cricket, I'm watching, is that player willing to dive head first? Because if you're playing for New Zealand, specifically the Black Caps, you need to be willing to dive head first at anything. Whether you're chasing the ball to the boundary or you're diving sideways along the boundary. You watch other international cricket teams, they're not willing to dive head first. So that's the first thing. But then it's like, it's the pickup, it's the throw. Is the throw a good throw to the stumps? Whether it's one bounce, whether it's over the top of the stumps. How many guys are backing up? It's a little bit nerdier when I think like, there's other things like, how do you pass the ball to the umpire? Like little stuff like that, which isn't related, but those are little cues I'm looking at. But those are more cues of like, are these guys nice guys? Do they pass the ball to the umpire in the breadbasket so it's easy for the umpire to catch? Because if you're throwing it at the umpire's toes, you're a bit of a dick, just straight up. Like, what are you doing? So that's not really related, but everything in that section of the fielder attacking the ball, fielding the ball, and getting the ball to the stumps, having players back up, that tells you how good that cricket team is. There's obviously other basketball, rebounding, screening, those type of things. But to get back to the Warriors, this is something that we've seen all season, and yes, the Rabbitohs scored points. To bring it back to the present moment, the Rabbitohs scored points. Those points weren't scary. They were scary in the game because you're like, is this ever going to stop for a few minutes there? But in no way did the Rabbitohs, like the Warriors controlled the game without the footy. The Rabbitohs, like Brandon Smith wasn't much of a factor in that game because the Warriors were tight around the ruck, because they were doing the things they're really good at. And the Warriors had a makeshift right edge defense. And you've seen it so many games now where you're expecting the Warriors to like fall off. You're expecting the Warriors to have some sort of slip up at the moment. But you can see the way their ruck defense is, they're fully engaged. They're working with each other, and their attention to detail is tremendous. And again, these are things we've never seen for the Warriors before. And unfortunately, after this weekend, after watching a torturous game for the Warriors women, that is the difference between these two teams, the two Warriors teams. The men are playing high-level rugby league. We've talked about it with the footy. Again, both wingers scored tries against the Rabbitohs. They scored tries in the middle of the field. The Rabbitohs score their tries on the left side of the field. The Warriors score their tries all across the park. So they're doing high-level attack. Doesn't matter who's in the halves, they're scoring points. They've got high-level defense. They got the high-level fundamentals when it comes to ruck control, ruck defense, wrestling, grappling, skills, passing skills in both directions. Guys like Tanis Dallas-Smith, Eddie Iramia Toiava, Dimitri Vaimonga, who's actually the best at it, but those players are getting into the shape with their passing. Let alone Fisher, Harris, Barnett, who are doing a couple of passes, but it's Aaron Clark who leads that. I feel like I have to sum it up, but I don't know if I can. That's just a waste of time. So, hit me.
Yeah, well, in light of that, there was something I was wondering during that Rabbitohs game, seeing the Warriors win with another different... It's not a different halves combination, is it? Because I think it was Chanel Harris-Tavita and Luke Hansen together when Hansen played previously. No. Because wasn't it Harris-Tavita who gave him the pass to...
No, it was Luke Hansen and Tanner Boyd.
Ah, right.
And Tane Tuapiki gave Hansen the pass.
That's Tuapiki, that's right.
But sorry to interrupt, but that sums up the Warriors' half stuff right now. Because Hansen's won his 2 games at number 6. Lest we forget, Luke Metcalf lost both his games at number 6. Hansen's first game, he was playing with Tanner Boyd. Second game, playing with Chanel Harris-Tavita. So usually Harris-Tavita's number 6. But Hansen's won both of his games at number 6. One of which Harris-Tavita's been playing halfback.
And yeah, they won, well, they won 2 games recently with Metcalf starting at halfback, but really won because he went off injured early in another. Although they were already winning when he went off injured, so he gets some credit for that. Won a lot of games with Tamati Martin at halfback. Like, there's been so much alteration through the season, injury enforced in all of these cases, and they've continued to succeed with different guys there, which had me wondering during that Rabbitohs game. And then in light of what you're saying there about the importance of a running dummy half or a dummy half who can assess the options and see where the space is and get the ball there nice and quickly. How much credit do you think Wade Egan gets for how good the halves have been through various different combinations throughout the season? Because it does seem like he's someone who, A, has been a consistency throughout this, but also B, like, in terms of the ball movement and the shifting and the setting things up, he actually does seem to take a very big role in that for the team. Like, he does take a lot of pressure off the halves, particularly the half back, because of how well he assesses things and shifts the ball where it needs to go and just gets things rolling for the Warriors when they're moving.
Yeah, very influential. It's a tricky question, but Egan can pass. He can do a 10-meter spiral pass with eye fakes in both directions. Sorry. So I don't know who your dummy half is, Jacob Little. Like, he might be able to throw a 10-meter spiral pass in both directions. I don't know if he can do it with the eye fakes as well. So first and foremost, you've got a player who can quickly and efficiently get the ball where it needs to go, but he's often not passing directly to the half, because that's where your forward passing comes in. And that's another detail the Warriors are very good at, because yes, Aaron Clark does do the most passing week to week. But so Aaron Clark, I think on the weekend he had 13 passes, but then Fisher Harris has 4. Barnett has 3. These aren't factual, these are just like figures. Eddie Onomir has 2. Vaimonga has 3. So all those guys are doing 1 or 2, 3 passes. So Egan is often passing to Aaron Clark. He's often passing to Fisher Harris. But so your question was, how important is he to the form of the halves? Which, like, is fair. I think there's a better way to frame it where it's like,
yeah, there's a bigger picture to what he does, I guess.
well, he's just important to the team,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, when everything is so good, because also, like, what helps the halves? Well, if you're winning the ruck with and without the footy, that's going to help the halves as well. And this is why we've seen so many different halves succeed, because usually the Warriors are dominating the opposition physically. Usually they're controlling the ruck. Regardless of how good or bad their kicking game is, usually the Warriors are winning the battle of territory. And the Warriors have so many different, like, focal points of attack. And we've talked about this before, like the first gap behind the ruck, and then you've got a second gap and a third gap. And the Warriors can attack all those gaps. So it's, but like your point stands, because if you've got a good dummy half, it's going to help your halves, right? But it's also, if all of your middle, like, I don't know how many of your Dragons middle forwards can execute a good clean pass in both directions.
There's a couple of them. There's a couple good ones.
I know all the Warriors forwards can. So there's no drop when Vaimunga comes onto the field, right? When Tennisdales comes on the field, because they get into the shape. And it goes back to, like, yes, the half is very important, but if the guys around them aren't skillful enough, if they're not fully tapped into the details required, it makes the halves job so much harder, let alone the fullback and his value and his importance as well.
Yeah, you don't have a Couchman to Kerr drop off when the bench comes into use. And yeah, that's probably because Egan maybe is the obvious one if you're looking for someone else who because it is a ball playing role, who takes the pressure off the halfbacks to help them do what they do. But it's probably, thinking on what you're saying, it's probably equally fair to say, like, Aaron Clark maybe gets every bit as much credit for that as well. And then further still, as you're saying there, it's like, yeah, they help that position, but if you're playing well, you help every position, and everyone helps everyone else, and it all sort of spirals up in one of those rising tide lifts all boats type of ways.
But there is a difference between, and obviously, because Wade Egan's one of the best dummy halves in the NRL, specifically passing the footy, Sam Healy's still developing. So there is a difference between Wade Egan and Sam Healy. I don't expect Sam Healy's passing to always be on point. Spiral passes in both directions. I haven't even seen him do the eye fakes. So there is a notable difference between those two dummy halves. But then you get deeper, like Makai Tafua, his passing was really good in the games he's played and so on. But yeah, the Clark thing is interesting, because often Wade Egan's passing to a middle forward, Clark, who's then putting it on a platter for the half. Righto there. We went deep into the Warriors mangroves as usual. We do have the Tall Ferns did play in a pre-Olympic qualifying tournament. What do we need to know about the Tall Ferns at the moment?
Well, as to the tournament itself, they did fairly well. Like they went 2-2. I think it was a solid performance, slightly, I want to say, as of expectations, but I'm gotten quite used to the Tall Ferns being below the expectations I have at some of these recent tournaments. They've really struggled to be able to get their best players available all at once, and this is a similar squad to the ones we've had in recent times. So for them to beat Argentina in their first game, very low scoring game, you don't often win scoring less than 60 in a game of basketball, but they did in this one. Then they lost, scoring a similar amount against Brazil in their second game. But Brazil are ranked like 9th in the world. And obviously these teams at this time of the season, WNBA is going on. So it's not like everyone had their best team. Brazil would have been missing players, but then so were we. We didn't have Shelley Sledger-Walker, for example. So from there, they had to win against South Sudan to get through to the knockout round, and they did. They had they were trailing for a lot of it, but Emi Shearer had a spectacular performance, scored 32 points, 16 of 16 free throws. The rest of the team shot 4 free throws combined between all of them and missed all 4 of them, and she went 16 for 16. So a spectacular game-winning performance from Shearer there to get the Tall Ferns into the semi-finals, where they lost to Canada. And Canada went on to thrash Mexico in the finals. So that's how that went. The 8 teams at the pre-Olympic qualifying tournament are the 8 teams who went to the World Cup qualifying tournament earlier in the year, in about March, and didn't progress. So the teams that didn't qualify from there had their own little tournament here. The winning team, and only the winning team, earns a spot in that. So that was Canada, earns a spot in the qualifying tournament for the next Olympics. That's why this was the pre-qualifying tournament. But while the Tall Ferns probably won't qualify for the Olympics because they haven't qualified for the Olympic Games since Susie Bates was playing as their last major tournament, they don't qualify for World Cups either. It's been a long time between drinks there. So they probably won't get to the tournament, but they're not out of it yet. Just because they didn't qualify through the pre-tournament doesn't mean the pre-qualifiers doesn't mean they can't still get to the qualifying tournament by the normal route, which is to get top 4 at the Asia Cup next year. So that's the thing that they all target. Now, these were good games, probably seen in preparation for that. I would argue a lot of their recent tours have probably been in preparation for that type of thing. Definitely, they were trying to peak for World Cup qualifying, lost all 5 games when they got there. So that wasn't great, but the Asia Cup is top 4 at the Asia Cup is a targetable thing. They've done it once before. It was in 2023. They finished 5th or 6th, I think, last time they went. So they're a team that's probably on the fringes of that and will have to be better to do that. But there were some nice signs at this tournament, particularly Emi Shearer's performances, which had her in the All-Star 5 for the tournament. So that's great stuff. 3rd top scorer there. She was really good. They are starting to find a bit more consistency with a different generation of players who, they had a bunch of players that they had at that 2023 Asia Cup, which did really well, and then kind of have struggled to be able to get players like that back again. Penina Davidson, Talia Tupaya, the Ledger Walkers, Ezra McGoldrick hasn't been in the last few. Players like that for various reasons, probably because it's very hard to be a professional women's basketballer. So you're not always available for international tournaments that are coming up here or there. There's a different coach now with Nat Hurst taken over since then. So for whatever the reason happens to be, they seem to be working with a different group of players, but they're starting to get some consistency from that. And we saw at this tournament, them able to win a couple of games as well. So they beat the 2 teams that were ranked below them. They lost to the 2 teams that were ranked above them, but they only just lost to Brazil. Canada were comfortably too good. But the fact they were able to get themselves into a game against Canada in the semifinals is good progress. It's a team that can win games at these sort of tournament things now. So take that into the Asia Cup midway through next year. That's still about 8, 9, 10 months away. That's the thing to aim for the Tall Ferns program from here on now.
And the under 18 Tall Blacks finished with a bronze medal at the Asia Cup. I don't know if you can just rattle off recent results for age group men's basketball teams off the top of your dome, but it seems like whether it's World Cups, Asia Cups, they always do very well, which is why we're so excited about the future of New Zealand basketball. They did lose to China in the semi-finals, and then they bounced back with a win against South Korea to seal the bronze medal at the Asia Cup. So again, New Zealand is just straight up one of the best men's basketball nations in Asia, whether it's age grade or seniors. They're just one of the best basketballing programs in Asia. And yes, New Zealand is part of Asia in a sporting sense for some sports, not others. And we have Jackson Ball We know him pretty well. Aubrey Chunga, Arana Robinson, we saw them for Wellington Saints. We've talked a bit about Cole Hopoi as well. These are very talented basketball players. So what do we need to know about the New Zealand under-18 men's team?
Yeah, weren't quite able to match what the previous wave did 2 years ago at the Asia Cup, under-18s Asia Cup, where they came second. But not far off. They dodged Australia in the semi-finals, but they lost to a very good Chinese team, who were the only team really of all the sides that they played, the only team that were able to match them for like rebounding, points in the paint, those kind of like tough big man type areas where the Tall Blacks, the junior Tall Blacks, I guess, really like cruised through their group where they were playing. Where did they play? Like Syria, Bahrain, someone else, Lebanon. Cruise through the group without much of a challenge. And so I was a little bit worried about how they might step up against Japan in the knockouts. Japan didn't win their group, but they only narrowly lost to South Korea to end up finishing second, and then won pretty comfortably against, I think it was Qatar, to get through their qualifying round into the quarterfinals, which New Zealand went straight through to for having won their group. So I was a little bit worried, maybe not worried, but I appreciative that would be a step up from what we saw in the group stage. It was actually their best performance. They won by about 40 points. It completely thrashed Japan. It was spectacular. Did lose to China in the semi-final. China only narrowly lost to Australia in the actual final, though. So I think we can recognize that as maybe that's not so much an underperformance from New Zealand as it is like that's just a good Chinese team. They matched New Zealand's best strategy, or not strategy, but the best area of their game, that sort of defensive rebounding type stuff. They went toe to toe with them there and were able to win on top of that. But then the bounce back from there to win the third place game against South Korea, I think also shows a lot of heart. So that's that's cool. That's what you want to be able to see. That's good mentality from young basketballers being able to turn up. And it's a top three finish at another major tournament from a bunch of players who most of them haven't been at one of these before. There's Jackson Ball is an obvious exception because he's been to under 17 and under 20, under 19 World Cups already. But there's a few new players to the program, and just to see that it's a replenishing thing. It's not just like I don't know if these guys now at the under 19 World Cup they've qualified for next year. I don't know if they're going to be able to repeat a top four finish like the previous wave did. That was pretty exceptional, where you've got Oscar Goodman and Julius Halaifanua and Hayden Jones and guys like this all coming through at once. But this is good proof that, especially on top of a pretty young Tall Ferns squad doing quite well at their pre-Olympic qualifiers there, on top of what we saw with the under 17 World Cups recently, where the men didn't do that great, but Jaden Cecil did that great. But the women had the best performance by a New Zealand women's team at a FIBA tournament ever in how they went. So, like, there's enough there to say that it's not just a case of a golden wave came through. It's enough there to say that all of these junior teams do pretty well at these tournaments. We've had a fourth place finish at the men's under 17s before. We've had a fourth place finish at the men's under 19s. They were like the under 18 Asia Cup. Last time we were second, this time we were third. Like semi-finals, competitive, winning games at that stage. In both cases, there's a trend here. We're pretty good at basketball. We're pretty good, especially with these the quality of young players on the rise through different ages. It's not just a golden generation. This is a replenishing thing where we're able to be competitive time and time again with different squads at these age levels.
Yeah, two things that popped into my head, not related, but it's a trend we like to see. We're not huge trendy guys, but these are trends we do like to see. And then your replenishment thing, I quickly thought of the Black Caps. Like, it's not a golden generation if you just replenish it and you just keep replenishing it and filling the spots that the apparent golden generation leave. Because that's something we've talked a lot about with the Black Caps as well. Like, many of us viewed it as a golden generation until the golden generation finished and things were still golden.
Yeah, and like an example of the opposite of that I've been from one of the other areas I've been tracking is when I was looking doing the domestic football roundup yesterday and looking at the Wellington Phoenix reserves team and their sort of youth development stuff there where they're currently on the run, like by far their worst ever Central League campaign in the Wellington region. Um, and this is coming a few years after they had like a team which had Finn Sermon and Isaac Hughes and the Kelly Hield bros and um, Ben Wayne, Libby Kikachi slightly before that. You know, a lot of players, Matt Sherrod, a lot of players, Finra Conchi, like all these guys who moved into the first team and did quite well. Schwan Loke is another one. Like perhaps they're a little bit in between that at the moment, and they only had, I think, 3 players in the New Zealand under-19 squad compared to about 8 or 9 that come from the Auckland FC catchment stuff. So that's maybe an example of the opposite of that, where there's a team that is a little bit between. I don't know if golden generation stuff talking about youth teams is fair because it's, you're trying to, the whole point of that is to keep replenishing those things. And also at the very start of their careers, that's not the stuff they're judged on. That's not that important. But if they are struggling for results at the moment, with a team that's maybe had seen a few too many guys move up into the first team and maybe not been able to replace them. But then I look at the next wave below that, and they had a massive presence in the recent New Zealand under-16s team, not just in the number of players in the squad, but also the players who were the best players were mostly guys who were in the Phoenix Academy. And a few of them are already playing for that reserves team. So we know there's a few young guys in there, like, 16-year-olds now, but Jack Clegg and Ben Tremberth were playing Phoenix reserves when they were 15 a few months ago as well. So perhaps that's not so much of a one thing's gone as it is like you're in between. There's very good players coming through that are not quite at that level yet. Yeah, one wave is crashed, another wave is swelling and coming through. So I think that's probably part and parcel with that stuff. But there's another, I guess a good reason why the replenishment in the New Zealand basketball stuff is so impressive, because they haven't really had dips. We're seeing continually good performances from different teams with different players at all of these different age grades and men's and women's, different tournaments in Asia at the FIBA stuff as well. Like they just turn up and play well at all of these things. And I think another an easily overlooked aspect of this, but probably maybe as crucial as anything, is the quality of coaching that is setting these guys up as well. Because the number of Kiwi coaches that we see and different names that go through these different teams, and then few of them are now employed by the Breakers, for example, Josh Mama, and it had a lot to do with a few of those recent youth teams, and now he's an assistant for the Breakers for their upcoming season. Like, I think the coaching goes a long way towards helping get the best out of the development of the players, particularly younger players.
Yeah, I refuse to think there's a golden generation for reserve grade teams like that.
No, there cannot be. Yeah.
But your wave thing, that's prevalent with the Warriors, because we've seen the wave of the youngsters step into the NRL, which is like finished with Eddie Adamir Toyava. There's a bit of overlap with McCowatt, who did make his debut earlier this year. But there's another wave of youngsters coming through the Warriors system, many of whom are the players who aren't playing New South Wales Cup right now. That's why I find that so interesting. Because the next wave, Jason Salalilo, Bishop Neal, Christian Sukavea, those type of guys are coming through the system. But they're not playing, so they're not the wave right now. But there's another wave that is part of the next wave, because there's guys like Tyson Hansen, Jack Thompson, Winitana Patalaseo, Jilo Nain, and so many other players who are contributing to excellent Warriors footy in New South Wales Cup. But it's not a golden generation, because you just can't have a golden generation in reserve grade. Like, both in terms of literally and figuratively. Like, literally,
all of the above for that.
Yeah, literally they go on to the higher level. So there's no like generation, and figuratively you just can't have a golden generation for your second team. Like,
No,
it's
you're doing something wrong if
yeah.
you if that's where you're aiming for.
Just quickly, do you have like a favorite thing from local football? You're big on the local football. You dominate the coverage for local football. On our website, theniche-case.com, every Monday there's a local football roundup. What's your favorite thing from local football this week?
Um, well, I guess the thing that counts the most is who's going to win the trophies. And so we do have like National League qualification and stuff that's going down because there's really one full week left, but there are a couple of rescheduled games that have to be played afterwards as well. So this weekend is the last main round. We should pretty much wrap up most of the top seasons, top three men's and women's leagues from that point onwards. And then the week afterwards is Chatham Cup, Kate Shepherd Cup final. And then if you catch me attack and you have a rescheduled game, but you're also in the Chatham Cup final, you have to then play your last game a week after that. And then you've probably got National League not very long after that. I don't know if there's an official date on the start of that yet. Probably because they don't know exactly who the teams who will have qualified yet, because there's one or two spots up for grabs. Kashmir Tech are trying to go through men's and women's. This is the crazy thing about them, is that a couple of weeks ago on Saturday, they both clinched their Southern League / South Island League championships on the same day. The women by winning, and the men by they won the next day, so they would have clinched it then. But the team that was their closest rivals, Ferrymead Bays, didn't win, so they clinched it without having to do anything. So on the same day they won they won their respective league championships. The following week, on the Saturday, I think it was, the women beat the Wellington Phoenix Reserves to qualify for the National Cup final, and the men the following day beat Napier City Rovers to qualify for the National Cup final. So they did that together. They're both still undefeated. So they're both working on trying to get, not quite, I guess a perfect season would be winning every game. That's a bit much. They have had a couple of draws, not very many, but a couple of draws in there. But they're both working on undefeated seasons. They're both in National Cup finals. They're both champions of the South Island. So that's what Kashmir Tech have been doing this year. Birkenhead United men's are also still undefeated with, I think, might just be one game to go for them. I'm not sure if they've got I think they've just got the one left. They drew 0-0 with Fencibles on the weekend, so that was a tough one for them. Went down to 10 men. Late first half, Monty Patterson got sent off for a sliding tackle that got a little bit out of control and was very late. So they're close to an undefeated. They cruised to the Northern League Championship. They won that a few weeks ago. I think they might have been the first team to wrap it up. Wellington United women wrapped up the Women's Central League as well, which leaves us with two going into the final week. The Northern League women's stuff, the NRFL Premiership, where Eastern Suburbs had taken control with a win over Auckland United a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago. But then last week, for the two best defensive teams probably in the country, a very surprising result that it would end up 6-4. But Auckland United won 6-4 against Eastern Suburbs, so they retake control of it. But they have to win their last two games in order to. They've got way better goal difference. So if they win these two games, they'll win the title probably on goal difference. If they don't, then Eastern Suburbs can catch them by winning their one last game. Eastern Suburbs still top, but with the United have a game in hand. But Auckland United play midweek against Fencibles. That's on the live stream on the NRF channel as well on YouTube. So that is probably worth watching if anyone's interested in that stuff, because that is a game that'll. I don't think Auckland United will slip up against. Is it Ellerslie if they play in the last one? I can't remember, but it's a simpler game. But Fencibles are a tough one. They might be able to hang on for a draw. So that's the game that might well decide the title there. And then the Men's Central League is the other one, where Napier City would have won it had they beaten Miramar Rangers on the weekend at home. They were 2-1 up, I think, at halftime. They ended up losing 3-2. Conceded to a winner of like 6 minutes into stoppage time. Theoretically getting up onto an Owen Smith corner kick, a header at the back post, that'll do it. The difference between a loss and a draw doesn't really matter for Napier because the situation is the same. They just need to beat the bottom place team away from home, though, FC Western next week. So they do that, then they're champions. If they don't do that, though, the win for Miramar means they jump ahead of Wellington Olympic, who were held to a 1-1 draw against Petone on the weekend. So Miramar, if Napier City don't win, Miramar will take the title if they win. But Wellington Olympic can still win themselves if both of those two teams slip up. So basically, Napier need one result to go their way. That's their own one. If they win, they're champions. Miramar need two results to go their way. They need to win, and they need Napier not to win. Wellington Olympic need three results to go their way. They need Napier and Miramar both to not to win, and then themselves to also win. So that's pretty unlikely. But it still gives us a situation. We're heading into the final round of the season in the Men's Central League. There are three teams who could lift the trophy, which is pretty crazy stuff at the end of a long season. And all three of them have already qualified for National League. So it won't be the end of those rivalries either. We'll see them again later this year and also next year for the full-on National League. When that gets revamped, those three teams will also all be there. In fact, I think Miramar's win officially clinched them into that. So that goal at the end kept them in the title race, but arguably even more importantly, since they're probably not going to win that title because Napier should beat Western, it puts them into National League for this year and for next year. So that is the most significant reward for that. So yeah, big moment there, and still a fair bit to go in the last round of the domestic season, where quite a few shifting pieces are up for grabs.
Righto, let's finish with some cricket. Starting in England. County Championship cricket, Henry Nicholls had a big old knock of 96, I believe, playing for Somerset. So he's in pretty good form in terms of long form batting. He wasn't as good in the ODIs versus West Indies, but he's doing pretty well in long form batting, and it's the opposite for Will Young. Will Young was actually pretty solid in the ODIs versus West Indies, but he's been less effective in the long form stuff, test cricket, and actually there's a very interesting battle between Henry Nicholls, who's maybe risen above this battle because he was selected at number 3 for the Black Caps, seems to have that job locked down for the time being. I'm still fascinated by Will Young versus Nick Kelly, and a bit of Henry Nicholls there as well. Nick Kelly didn't have any runs, a major score this week for Leicestershire. Somehow always managed to say it wrong, but that's right. At least I am getting some names right this episode. But that's a very interesting pocket of Black Caps batting, specifically the long form stuff, because that's where we do think the Black Caps favour the mature batters, but at least there's competition for those spots. So all three of them are playing County Championship cricket. Nick Kelly, Will Young, Henry Nicholls. Ajaz Patel is playing in the same team as Nick Kelly. He took a few wickets recently as well. And then we do have Brett Randall and Ray Toole playing, but I want to focus on Ray Toole because he's a very effective lefty who I think we need to watch out for. Ray Toole hasn't crept into much NZA cricket, but he's been very good. And he isn't, I don't think he's as extreme as Ben Lister. Ben Lister's who is playing in the NZA T20 team at the moment in the top end T20 series. I don't think he's as extreme as Ben Lister in terms of moving the ball away from right-handers usually, but Ray Toole does often nip the ball away from righties back into lefties. I think he might have dismissed Ajaz Patel with that exact delivery. Ajaz Patel, a lefty batter. Ajaz Patel, pretty good batter. And Ray Toole went through his defense. Little bit of CD crime there. I think Ray Toole has Black Caps potential. Brett Randall, I think, is Black Caps potential as well, but he retired hurt and only took 2 wickets in this game, where Ray Toole took 5 wickets in the game, and he's been awesome throughout his career. He has a first-class bowling average of 27. One dayers, he's 31.4. T20's 29.6. Hasn't played a lot of T20 cricket, so I'd be looking for him to build out in the T20 format That's if New Zealand cricket can actually give a shit about their T20 competition, because they didn't seem to give a shit about the Super Smash before, and they don't seem to give a shit about the Super Smash right now. But whatever. And as we always love, a not out. Rabbitohs has, what do we got? 6 not outs in his last 7 innings. So it's good stuff from Rabbitohs batting down the order, obviously. Not quite Will O'Rourke, but Rabbitohs, not outer. And he is the next best lefty behind Ben Lister. So you got Ben Lister, Rabbitohs, a little bit of Muhammad Abbas, who has bowled. He's bowled 3 overs in the top end T20 tournament as a lefty seamer. And I did do a deep dive into New Zealand's seam bowling depth on our website, theniche-case.com. That's before you get to Thomas O'Connor. And I'd like to see Thomas O'Connor dominate domestic cricket for a bit more than 3 months. So that's his next step in development, which is a logical one. Like, can you do it again for another half a season at least, before we throw Thomas O'Connor into the Black Caps? But there is Rabbitohs, and Rabbitohs has been very effective in a far longer period than Thomas O'Connor. So watch out for Rabbitohs. He's playing for Glamorgan, and he should be lining up there once again whenever the next round of county championship cricket swings our way. The New Zealand A team have won their first 2 games, and they're playing tonight against Hyderabad. So they did play Adelaide, they played ACT, they dismissed Adelaide for 118, chased that down pretty easily. They dismissed ACT for 86, chased that down pretty easily, which is great. Good stuff. Jaden Lennox, 6 wickets at 4s. So Jaden Lennox hasn't been a major factor for the Black Caps in T20 cricket, because all of his excellence this year has been in ODI cricket. He's one of the best ODI bowlers in the world right now. But his best format is T20 cricket. So watch out for Jaden Lennox moving into the Black Caps T20 team, because I think he's going to be very effective there. And he's dominating. He's the best bowler for New Zealand A in this tournament so far. He's bowled the most overs, 7 overs, got the most wickets, averaging 4.3. And he's one of the most economical bowlers. He is the most economical bowler who's bowled in both games so far for New Zealand A. Eddie Ashok, the leggy, he took 4 wickets in the first game with moving the ball both ways, wrong-ins and leggies and whatnot. And also Zach Gibson. He came into the team for the second game. He took 4 wickets. So when we're thinking, how's New Zealand A bowling Adelaide out for 118, ACT for 86? Jaden Lennox probably going to be one of the best bowlers at this tournament. They got a good leggy, Eddie Ashok, and Zach Gibson. Shout out Ben Lister. He did take 3 wickets in his one game. He also went for 10.6 RPO. Still don't know if Ben Lister's Black Cap's good yet. I don't know if we'll ever know. It's just one of the... For someone who's not very highly ranked, I do find myself thinking a lot about Ben Lister, which is a bit weird. But Zach
Gibbs, the left arm thing, isn't it?
It's the left arm thing, but it's also, I just don't know if he's good or not. I think he's good.
Yeah, well.
I don't know if he's good. But he's been on the scene. He's been in these positions for a long time. Whereas someone else like Zach Gibson, this is his first opportunity playing at the New Zealand A level. And Zach Gibson had the lowest or second lowest average for ND in each format last summer. Not the leading wicket taker, but he was their most efficient bowler basically overall as a seamer. And he took 4 wickets at 3.6 RPO in his first game for New Zealand A. And that's very interesting because of how he performed last season with ND across the formats. And like, I think I'm far more excited about Zach Gibson than I am Ben Lister. Let me put it that way. So I'm curious to see what Zach Gibson does moving forward. And he does seem to have a bit about him. Not the quickest, but he is a big lad, moves the ball, seems to bowl quick enough. Other wicket takers, Matt Fisher took 1 wicket. He's only played the 1 game. Muhammad Abbas took 1 wicket as well, and Josh Clarkson's taken 1 wicket. And we've only had 3 batters who have batted twice so far, not chasing big totals. Cartene Clark, he's batted twice, and he's got 6 runs. So he's still trying to figure out how to bat over there in Australia. And leading run scorer is Tim Robinson, 57 runs, strike rate of 150. Matt Boyle, 55 runs, strike rate of 117. They've batted twice. Bevan Jacobs has batted once. He hit a 28 not out, strike rate of 155. And Dean Foxcroft had a 26 not out, strike rate of 108. Shout out Muhammad Abbas. He also had 9 not out. Tim Robinson, someone I think could grow into an all-format batter for the Black Caps. He's mainly a T20 batter right now, but I do think he's got all-format potential. We know Bevan Jacobs, Dean Foxcroft, part of that Black Caps mix, but in a far more positive and energetic way, I also find myself thinking a lot about Matt Boyle. Because I know Matt Boyle's really good. It's like I just can't figure out the Ben Lister puzzle. But there's no puzzle for Matt Boyle. Matt Boyle's just straight up the best batter not playing for the Black Caps, or yet to play for the Black Caps. And most people would know Matt Boyle as a T20 batter because he was a leading Super Smash run scorer a few seasons ago. And he's been, he played T20 Blast for Middlesex a few months ago. He was solid in the Super Smash last season, gives it an almighty whack, but last season was his best season in all formats of batting for Canterbury. And I think he can play Test cricket, he can play one-day cricket, he can play T20 cricket for New Zealand. And I think, he was in my top 3 players for New Zealand A that I did earlier this year, alongside Curtis Heafy and someone else. I can't remember exactly who. But Matt Boyle's been on multiple New Zealand A tours, and he's always pretty good. So I predict he will be the next batter to play for the Black Caps, which of course we've got Jacobs, Muhammad Abbas, Tim Robinson, Cartene Clark, Dean Foxcroft, Mitch Hay. All those guys have already played for the Black Caps in one format or another.
Nice. It was Ray Hall, you said, was at Glamorgan, right?
Yes.
Glamorgan, the same Welsh county that the city of Swansea is based in. So I wonder if he's popping over to watch any Marcus Stamnich, Elijah Just games and vice versa between those guys. I think Wrexham is somewhere else. So no Libby Kakache stuff, although Kakache he's been injured for the first couple. Well, he's missed their last couple of games, or the first 2 games of the season with fatigue in his calf, is what they've said. And I don't know how you miss multiple games with fatigue, because by not playing, that's the thing that supposedly solves the fatigue, the rest. So I'm thinking maybe they just don't want to say that he's got a minor injury because people will get on his back about it. So they're just being nice about it. But hopefully he plays next up. But that's not I don't believe that's in the county of Glamorgan. So the Ray Hall is very much in the Swansea side of things there.
Yeah, sometimes you're just tired, you can... Sometimes having a rest could be
play at a World
tiring.
Cup after not a lot of conditioning, so yeah.
That's a good link up. We do love a bit of geography here. So you got Wales, obviously connected to England. Some folks would know that, some folks would not know that. But that would be why Swansea City and Wrexham compete in the England competitions, I'd imagine. Wales part of the colonisers, and that would be why Swansea City and Wrexham are part of the English football system.
Yeah, and Cardiff City, I think, which is also in Glamorgan, and Newport County, which I know, even though they're a lower ranked team, but I know them because Nick Sanev played three-quarters of half a season for them last year. So it's for the four EFL system, the top in England. Three of them have had New Zealanders within the past season and a bit, and one of them currently has two New Zealanders in their first 11, and another one has another New Zealander who will hopefully be playing a lot of games once he gets over his calf fatigue. And that's a surprising amount of indulgence in Kiwi players there from the Welsh. So shout out to those people. Better hit rate than across the other English clubs, in comparison, working out the numbers.
So would Swansea be in Cardiff?
I think they're separate cities in the same, it's not state, same county.
Sorry, my maps were
So
tripping
I don't know,
out,
maybe like an Auckland to
but
Hamilton type thing, or yeah.
But they're in the same vicinity, so maybe a bit of Rabbitohs lefty seam bowling into the also Marco Stamenic and a little bit of Elijah Just left footer.
No, but he's pretty good on both feet. So
yeah, he's got a left foot.
Kakache's left-footed, so wrong part of Wales, but still, there's something there.
We're keeping a close eye on Rabbitohs and definitely keeping a close eye on this top end T20 series in the top end. We got games against Hyderabad, then Wednesday Victoria, Thursday Bangladesh. So that's 3 days in a row. New Zealand are playing cricket, and it's all on YouTube. 5 p.m. kickoff today, and then 12:30, then 7:30, and that's where we're going to end the podcast. So shout out to everyone tuned in on the audio and video platforms. Do your best. Have a good day. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.